Hello everyone, my name is Sachs Center, and today I'm presenting my research proposal, The Impact of Financial Exclusion and Social Vulnerability Among Bangladeshi Migrant Worker in Malaysia. Malaysia hosts approximately 2.5 million documented migrant worker under the VPT scheme, with Bangladeshi migrant representing 38%, the single largest group according to IOM's 2025 labor migration country profile. Bangladeshi workers were selected because they were often experienced debt-related migration, employment vulnerabilities, and comparatively weaker institutional protection than other migrant groups. Two key concepts define this study: financial exclusion, which is my independent variable, is the inability to access formal financial services due to structural, institutional, or social vulnerability is my dependent variable, is the degree to which individuals are exposed to risks, sensitive to shocks, and limited in their adaptive capacity to cope and recover. The evidence is structural, not personal. Over 70% of Bangladeshi workers lack formal banking access, driven by employer control, work permits, and documentation barriers. Workers rely on costly informal accessibility, and the RAJA in 2024 found significant social integration deficits among Bangladeshi workers in Malaysia, suggesting financial exclusion compounds broader social vulnerability. Rather than describing studies one by one, I have synthesized what the literature collectively shows and where it falls short. Every study suggested financial exclusion is linked to increased vulnerability, but every study has a critical limitation. Mannan and Farhan studied household, not migrant worker. Raja found deficit qualitatively but didn't statistically test the FE-SB relationship. Ozili provide global evidence without Malaysian context. Data is sent in the UK, Milana, and Asta focus on microfinance without a migrant worker lens. The research gap is precise. No qualitative study has tested how financial exclusion translates into social vulnerability among Bangladeshi migrant worker in Malaysia. The gap persists because migrant population are difficult to access for formal research, and because previous studies have prioritized financial services provision over measuring the lived consequences of exclusion. This study has three objectives: examine the level of financial exclusion, assess the degree of social vulnerability, and they determine the impact of financial exclusion on social vulnerability all among Bangladeshi migrant worker in Malaysia. Each objective has a corresponding research question, and this study is guided by hypothesis 1. Financial exclusion has a significant positive impact on social vulnerability. The conceptual framework integrates how two theories, social exclusion theory by Townsend and Rome, explain why financial exclusion occurs through structural and institutional barriers, not individual failures. Chambers' vulnerability framework explains how those barriers translate into social vulnerability through exposure to risk, sensitivity to shock, and limited adaptive capacity. Together, they create a complete cause and effect model. The arrow between IV and DV represent hypothesis 1, the empirical claim this study will test. This study is significant for government policy, NGOs, financial institutions, and academic research, providing a quantitative Malaysia-specific evidence base that currently doesn't exist. Each methodological choice is justified by its underlying assumption and the why those assumptions are appropriate for the study. Positivism assumed relationship between variable can be objectively measured appropriate because FE and SB are statistically testable. The approach is deductive. The hypothesis flows from established theories. The design is cross-sectional, survey efficient hypothesis testing without longitudinal demand. Sampling is purposive and convenience-based. Purposive identify eligible Bangladeshi migrant worker. Convenience facilities practical access because no formal sampling are for frame exists, and access is constrained by respondent appropriate for this preliminary investigation as supported by Rossos in 1975 because no prior quantitative study has tested this relationship. There is no reliable effective size available for a meaningful prior G power calculation given the vulnerability of this population. Informed consent, anonymity, confidentiality, the right to withdraw are core ethical. The research instrument is a structured questionnaire with four sections: demographic, financial exclusion as IV, social vulnerability as DV, and barriers to financial inclusion analysis follows four sequential steps in IBM's SPSS. Step 1 is Kronberg's alpha reliability testing confirmed internal consistency of measurement scales with a threshold of 0.70. Step 2 will be descriptive statistics mean, standard deviation, frequency, and percentage profile the sample and addresses RQ and RQ2. Step 3 will be person correlation, examine the strengthen the direction of the FE and SB relationship addressing RQ. 3. Step 4 will be the simple linear regression test whether the financial exclusion significantly predicts social vulnerability and estimate the magnitude of the effect directly testing hypothesis 1. The regression output will report R squared, adjusted R squared, and over F test beta coefficient the statistic p value below 0.05, VIF below 10, and the tolerance above 0.10 to assess multicollinearity. This study is significant across 4 groups: government and policymakers gain and evidence-based grounded in vulnerability outcomes. NGOs can identify which dimensions of exclusions most strongly predict vulnerability. Financial institutions gain insight for designing accessible product, and academic research gain a quantitative Malaysia specific contribution. To summarize this study, investigate the impact of financial exclusion proposed by structural barriers on social vulnerability among Bangladeshi migrant workers in Malaysia, quantitative deductive cross-sectional grounded in social exclusion theory and Chambers vulnerability framework, data collected at the proposed sampling site in Sunway from 30 to 50 respondents, analysis in IBM SPSS. All 13 references used in preparing this research proposal are listed here in APA format. Thank you so much for your attention.